just asked me what my problem is with the fine-tuning argument.
Right.
Essentially. Okay, so for me, in order to draw inferences, you have to be able to correlate the effect with a cause. So the information argument for that reason is much stronger to me, because when we see certain kinds of information or information systems, we know that conscious mind is a cause that produces that effect.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with fine-tuning, I have much more difficult time understanding how you can specifically correlate these coincidences with conscious mind.
Is it because they're material? Because, for example, gravity and I don't know. I mean, I know there's a whole litany of fine tuning issues that are how do you put that? The odds are really astronomical that these types of that these types of variants or variables came together as they are. Mm-hmm. So are you saying because it's a physical thing that it's hard to correlate with mind?
Well, I just don't know. I understand the low probability argument. I mean, I think I understand it. But even the low probability argument, I don't think allows you to really differentiate between intelligence or conscious mind versus naturalistic causes.
Well, there's two options. There's either the option, and I know you know this, but it was either put here on purpose, mindfully, intelligently, or the other option, unless someone could tell me otherwise, is that it got here, the same thing, the fine tuning, all that's involved with that, got here without mind, and basically just matter, like accidental movements of matter, or just because, I don't know how they like to frame it, but whatever, it's accidental, mindless movements of matter that did it. So it's one of the two. So you couldn't prove either one, but it seems to me that the fine-tuning argument is strong because the odds are astronomically small that those variables would turn out like they did. So yeah, you couldn't prove mind, but it seems to me that that's the more logical position on it. Does that make sense? I mean, I know you probably can see that.
I'm sorry, I actually had to step out for 1 second.
Oh, sorry. So you didn't hear?
Summarize that in like one sentence.
I don't even know if I remember what I said. No, let's see. Yeah, I just said it's between mind or intelligence and non-intelligence, and I said you couldn't prove either one. But the fact that you do have these astronomical odds, like I say, you couldn't prove it, but it seems to me that the logical position, the most logical position would be that mind did it. And so, I mean, I know that's just kind of I'm not saying anything that's profound or anything, but I guess the point is you couldn't prove it either way. It's just more logical, and I don't know.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I've actually been revisiting the argument recently for that reason, I guess. And I think it was Michael Denton who put it a certain way that kind of resonated a little bit more with me, and it's that all of these different parameters of reality, they're independent of each other. So they could be anything. They could have any value independently of each other. And so it's the fact that they all converge on the very, very narrow range of outcomes that allows for that allows for the combinatorial space required for intelligent life like ourselves to exist, that's a much better way of that resonates with me a lot more.
Yeah, it's a unity. It's a matter of, it seems like it's a unity, or it's a oneness about it. You know, it is separate and isolated things that had to have come together by chance in a way that did sort of create this wholeness, you know, about existence, which, you know, kind of to me screams that it screams design. It screams in a way a singular thought, you know, a purpose, you know. So to me, that is the fine tuning from in my brain. Obviously, I'm maybe cemented in my thoughts and views, but even as a relative non-believer, back when I was younger, I mean, I was never an atheist, but I didn't really put much, you know, much brain power towards it. But I would have, you know, I think the fine tuning argument, had I heard it then, would have been overwhelming as far as logically sound, that, you know, it infers a creator over that of just mindless movements of matter doing it. But that's just me. I know others think other ways.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds okay. The argument sounds okay, and I can kind of understand the reasoning. But the problem is that there's no hard differentiation for me. And it almost seems like you could say that any outcome was, quote, special. And so therefore you could say that any set of parameters converges around whatever outcomes they produce. I don't see how you can...
Well, we'll look at the other way. Take it the other direction. If it was mindless movements of matter that had absolutely no goal, no preordained unity or thought or purpose, well, what are the odds that all these different parameters came together like they did? You know, isolated events happen like that. I mean, I think it's a good way to do it, is look at it, the odds of each happening. And I just don't see the mindless explanation being rational, really.
Well, I think maybe there are some plausible alternatives, at least superficially plausible, which, I don't know, may be sufficient for the kinds of things we're talking about. But I mean, you've got the multiverse. That's a simple way of dealing with the probability problem, which to me, yeah, sure, it sounds like kind of a dodge, but I think it raises the differentiation problem, though, again.
Yeah, it is a dodge. I mean, it's what they're doing by that is they are not looking at the evidence that's right in front of them. In other words, it seems to me they're trying to escape the actual hard evidence of our existence, the only one we know of, and they're contemplating other existences to sort of rationalize their position, which otherwise seems untenable.
Well, I mean, I could say this. If it was shown that the multiverse was, how do I say it? If it was shown that the multiverse required fine-tuning itself, or let me say it another way, if we were able to eliminate the multiverse somehow, mathematically or something like that, then yeah, I think the fine-tuning argument would be much more compelling to me. But I think it's a developing argument, and I've got my eye on it, but it hasn't quite got me yet. Just the information argument to me is so much more concrete. You know, conscious mind creates information systems.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. You know, nothing unconscious produces that.
Right. Matter moving in accidental ways doesn't create information at all. So I don't see how they have any sort of argument at all, other than, you know, like in biology, what they do to get around it is they'll say, well, the genome isn't really information per se. It's just the actions of chemistry and physics. It all boils down to chemistry and physics, and it's all downhill from there. So they, in a way, they try to say that it's not really information at all, or they used to. Now, I don't know if they're still actually doing that with a straight face or not, but I think most, from what I can gather, I think most of the people in science actually do acknowledge that that the genome is chock full of information. So, and I think you're right. I think it's a powerful evidence for design, an argument for design.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really wish that I could that somebody could articulate the fine-tuning argument in as concrete a way as that. But so far, I'm still on the fence about it. About, are we just is this just a perception thing? Do we simply perceive that it's special because of everything that we get out of it? Or is it actually special somehow? I mean, I don't know if that's an objective thing or if it's just subjective.
Kind of like beauty. If you, astronomers will peer out into space and be awed by the astounding beauty of what's out there, and other fields of science, geneticists and mathematicians, they all in their own fields often remark about how beautiful, like mathematical equations are, for example, and even the stuff in the small, physicists will talk about that too, the beauty of certain things that they see in their equations. So that's a common thing, but what you're saying is probably true. I mean, is it objective? Is it subjective? Is it really beautiful, or is it just because our minds are?
Right, and so to me, the fine-tuning argument seems to rely on the assumption that these perceptions of beauty or utility or whatever are objective. But I'm not sure if I can accept that assumption quite yet.
I don't know that I see the fine-tuning argument as being something that is subjective. I mean, if that's what you're saying, that it's a matter of personal.
I mean, yeah, I kind of think so. Because the only reason we think that our set of parameters that we wound up with is special is because it's conducive to what we are.
Hey, Scott. Well, what if we had a big lottery container with billions and billions of balls, little balls, ping pong balls, and there was one of them that was marked with the number, just any given number, and there were billions or trillions of other balls with different numbers. And I said, okay, you got to pick that one ball. If you went up and picked a ball out and you picked that one number that I asked you to pick, you would probably think that the game was rigged. And so I think that's basically what the fine-tuning argument is you've got all these different isolated sort of, events that had to happen in a just so way that made life, the capacity for life, available to us. And so that's, I don't know, I think that's a powerful evidence for, for a deity, for a purpose.
Well, I might be somewhat inclined to agree, but I kind of feel like you have to rule out infinite probabilistic resources.
Yeah, but that's faith-based, right? I mean, if you're gonna invoke the multiverse, that there's an infinite number of universes, that's faith-based. You can't prove that. And same thing with time. If you have infinite, if you have infinite time, that's.
You could also look at the low probability as evidence for the existence of those probabilistic resources, maybe.
Well, probability. I mean, if you're going to go to probability, the probability, I think, with the fine-tuning argument would be that it is rigged. But the probability is kind of a is kind of a different word for faith, I think, in a way. To some degree, you know, I mean, if it's a probability, it's not fact and it's not proven. So there is an element of faith in there.
Well, I don't know. I think that probability just means have there been sufficient trial? How many trials would be required to achieve certain outcomes? And
Right.
so you can ask, were sufficient trials available to achieve these outcomes? So that's the probability argument from the way that I see it. And so then the multiverse is kind of saying, yeah, it's totally possible that we do have the sufficient trials to achieve these outcomes, probabilistically.
Yeah. Well, it's a probabilistic argument, I think. You know, what are the odds of chance doing it? I mean, if you just roll the dice, a zillion-sided dice for each of these different parameters, what are the odds that anything remotely similar to what we've had could come about? And that's assuming that chance could do any of that anyway. I mean, that's kind of a given that I don't necessarily give the naturalists. They take it usually. They'll say, "Oh well, if you just you roll this dice," and I'm like, "Well, I'm not giving you the dice. You got to get your own dice, and you got to get your own existence. You got to get your own, whatever it was that started the Big Bang or before that. You got to get all that yourself. All that's got to get, come into existence somehow." So I think a lot of free passes are given to the naturalists that they don't necessarily deserve or have, deserved scientifically. But yeah. I will say, I'm a very black and white person. So when it comes to me talking to these guys, to me it's either mind or not mind. It's either intelligence or accident. But if you get them on camera, none of them really like those two alternatives, and so I think their mind is unacceptable, and dumb luck is just downright embarrassing, at least on camera, to admit. So they'll usually say something like, "Well, it was determined somehow." That's the other alternative, and I can't ever really I can't nail them down on how everything came about in a determined way, yet still mindlessly or using accident. So I don't know. So it's one of these kind of vague arguments that they throw out, but to me it's one or the other, and the other doesn't strike me as a powerful argument at all, that it just happened. And it's kind of like the thing about life coming into existence. Well, they've got all kinds of chicken and egg problems with that. So it's not really just a matter of figuring out which chemicals and physical properties and all these just so events, how they came together on their own, and just figuring that out scientifically, running experiments. It's that there's actually hard problems of, you got to have this to have that, you got to have that to have this, and there's multiple sides to the equation in some of these things. So it's more complex of an argument, and it's probably like that with the universe as well. I mean, if that's God's nature to create life in such a way that it's an enigma and an egg that can't be cracked, then my guess is that the universe is probably like that too. It's probably like that exactly.
Yeah. So like the fact that DNA requires proteins and proteins require DNA, you suspect that the situation is similar on the grand scale of
yeah. In fact, I would just
reality.
There's so much of that throughout biology that it's not even funny. That's the big one. But just for example, you have a ball and socket joint. Which came first, the ball or the socket? I mean, there's a zillion of them. So I mean, it's all throughout nature, and so it's not just a matter of this evolving and slowly to this, and it's like, no, you got to have all this, and it's not. A lot of times, it's not just two pieces; it's multiple pieces that have to be together at the same time. The other one, the famous one, is the mousetrap, the flagellum. So you got to have all those parts together at the same time for that thing to work and for it to be functional. So I have a feeling that's part of God's nature. It seems like a lot of things in nature are created that way. And so for the biggest thing, the most important thing, well, besides life, but universe, I have a feeling is a giant chicken and egg problem.
Well, let me tackle this from another angle. I was talking about this in another hangout recently about just the underlying structure of reality. Now, when we're talking about mind, I believe that mind depends on a substrate of some kind. So there has to be some kind of order or structure, some kind of complex order or structure. Now, if God exists, then we would expect that ultimate reality or ontological reality would possess some kind of a structure. Are you following me so far?
Physical structure, or what are you referring to?
Well, we could say mathematical structure or something like that. It doesn't have to be physical per se. Just some kind of an order has to be there to host mind or information systems.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what's interesting to me is that you have things like the amplituhedron, which is a geometric structure which exponentially simplifies calculations for particle interactions. Right. So we are arriving at a place where the most parsimonious view is that fundamental reality possesses some kind of a complex structure to it. So I think I'm not going to say that that's an argument for theism, but I will say that that's something that I would expect if there is some kind of substrate that can host something like a mind that we might think of as God.
Scott, jump in if you got something to say. We don't want to exclude you.
No, sorry, I'm just checking the weather. Sorry,
Oh,
because
okay.
we're getting our first snow here, so I'm just like watching it, intensely.
Oh, okay. Well, that's exciting. The first snow.
No, it's not. Not when you have a long driveway.
Ah.
Ooh.
Well,
You
other
know.
than that, well,
Yeah.
it depends. Where are you again?
I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at. I just did like the frantic shovel, you know, outside, and I'm looking like expect more. I'm like, damn, darn it.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm sorry, you got my attention. I just kind of came in this room. I've never talked to you before, Brandon, or I don't think I've ever met you before, but my name is Scott.
Hi, Scott.
I'm from the show Positively Godless. So I'm like
Cool.
the face of the show, and the other co-hosts don't come on here at all, and I just kind of come on here to promote
Promote the
promote
show.
promote the show,
Okay.
make friends, and that's kind of like what I like to do, to show that we're good people. Everyone's good people.
Okay. So tell us a little about your show. Actually, I'd be interested to know more about that.
Um, that's a very good question. We try to tackle things. Stuff in the news, Joshua Fierstein's obviously been in the news a lot lately. We tackle things like that, the Kim Davis thing. We kind of give our views and perspectives on it. We start funny, we end funny, and then we have bloopers at the end. But in the middle, it's just like we have really good discussion. We laugh a lot. They make fun of me all the time, and but we have good dialogue, and we like to laugh, and we'll go on rants and we'll complain. But we'll complain where it's warranted, at least from our position. You know, it's just like I don't like you because you believe and we don't. That's not what we're getting at. Our most famous tagline thus far is that we're more hated by non-believers than believers, and it's somewhat true. Some of the hate mail that we get from non-believers is vile. You know, absolutely vile.
I have that same problem.
Now, Brandon, I don't know what your position is. I think you're a theist, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So you're more hated by the theist people?
No, I was talking about the atheist, non-theist people.
Oh, okay. All
Okay.
right. Just making sure. So yeah, it's kind of our show. I mean, definitely check it out. You know, we're all over the internet, I guess. You know.
Although I do tend to rile up the other theists as well sometimes.
Oh, okay. How come?
Particularly, well, particularly on the issues of like fine tuning. I was just discussing that with Tom here,
Okay.
and then the issue of morality. I'm a little bit skeptical that you can say that, or at least that you can ascertain objective morality. So those are two main issues, but especially the morality issue. I get in trouble with that one.
Yeah, yeah, and see the thing is, and we'll be the first to admit it, or at least I'll say it for us, is that we're just idiots. We're just three idiots who get together in a coffee shop or a bar, not in a library at a high end university like Yale or Harvard, where you have to use these big words that have big words like gymnasium, stuff like that. So we keep it
So
kind of.
you guys rode the short bus.
I'm sorry.
You guys rode the short bus.
We did, but no, we mean.
I actually did.
Oh, you just hate your words again, didn't you, Tommy? Oh, Tommy,
That's not the
Only
first
for
time.
half a
Won't be the
year.
last.
won't be the last. Um, so yeah, we just have just conversations, and we want everyone to relate. Where we don't want to be one of those shows where we're talking about abiogenesis and stuff like that, because at least for the layperson like myself, we're just going to lose people. Um,
Mhm.
People could say like, "Yeah, I understand that," and we get good guests on, and we interview them as people, and um, we've had G-Man on. That was the start of our show, so we had to get the lower fruit. Um, but
Well, look. I mean, so here's how I see. Here's how I see atheists. So you could have different sort of types of shows. You could have the show where it was scientific, and if you had somebody on there who was scientific and also hated on Christians or hated on creationists, that would be one thing. But you guys have got a kind of I've got a big echo here. I don't know if it's
oh, it's me. I'm sorry.
oh okay. But you've got kind of a happy-go-lucky show that's not scientific per se. I don't think, from what I've seen of it. And so for you guys to just rip on in a nasty way Christians just for the sake of ripping on them just because it's fun, you would lose anyone who's even on the fence. I mean, there would be no Christians watching at all. But even people who are fairly neutral, I think, would be turned off by that.
Right, and that show's already been done. I mean, that show's been in existence for 8 to 10 years, called The Drunken Peasants,
Yeah,
and we don't want to be the drunken peasants. You
yeah,
know, that's been done. So
yeah.
I mean, to interrupt you. Sorry, Tommy.
No, no, I was done.
So Brandon, I hope that answers your question. Um,
Yeah, sure.
Check it out. I wrote the theme song. Oh, I didn't say that.
Is there a link on your profile to it?
Yeah, that's our whole show page. So I think that, if you just kind of scroll down to like some posts that I've posted or we've posted, you'll see like, hey, episode 35 or 30, I don't know, whatever episode, around 36, I think.
Okay.
You know.
Well, Brandon, I was just going to go back to what we're talking about and just say, if you could imagine, like if you had a room and in the room you had several pieces and building materials, and then you left and allowed nature just to take its course, I mean, the odds of those pieces of materials constructing themselves in such a way that something something unified was created, would be astronomically small. So I think that's kind of the same idea with the fine tuning. Fine tuning is if there's no one there, there's no mind, there's nothing behind it, intelligent wise. The odds of this stuff coming up with a coherent, cohesive, understandable thing that seems to be a unity with everything else that's come into existence. I think that's an argument, a good argument for a creator.
But you know what, though? I think low probability is insufficient, though, for drawing the inference, because, I mean, the most popular rejoinder to that is that low probability events occur all the time. So I think you need to go a little farther than that in order to justify the inference to a conscious mind.
Hey, Jazz.
Well,
yeah, I suppose we'd have to agree to disagree on that one. I mean, because to me, it's one or the other. And granted, they're extremes, and you couldn't prove either one. But since we're talking about probabilities, I think the probabilities would vastly favor the the theistic side.
well, what distinguishes your low probability outcome from any other low probability outcome?
You're going to have to dumb that down for me.
Yes.
So,
I need to be on the short bus, so yeah.
yeah, I graduated from the short bus.
I'm going backwards, man.
Well, after 30, it's all downhill. Well, how else can I put this? Every situation has low odds of occurring. In your example, what was your example again? Like a million-sided dice or something like that?
Well, one of them was the lottery machine, and then you just pick a ball that's has a certain number on it.
Right, but strictly speaking, no matter what you picked up would have had the same odds of occurring.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you differentiate then between any of those outcomes if they all have the same likelihood of occurring?
Well, it wouldn't have worked. I mean, evidently, there's these virtual knobs, that if they're altered slightly, the strong force, the weak force, all this nuclear stuff that is over my head. But evidently, if any of those knobs or dimmer switches or however you want to look at it are even slightly altered, evidently it screws up the whole system. So you would have to pick the right, finely tuned parameter in order for this stuff to all work together. So I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but you couldn't just pick any old ball. That's what I guess what I'm saying. You'd have to pick the right ball. You'd have to pick the right parameter.
But that's the thing about the laws of nature, that these things you say, oh well, if they were any different then they wouldn't work. But the fact is they have worked because those particular set of outcomes have happened.
Well, let's take just for example, and I don't even know if this is one of them that they use for fine tuning, but the fact that the Earth, I guess they do, seems to be a real beneficial place as far as its distance from the sun. So, like if we were in Mercury's position, for example, everything would burn up and there would be no life. It just happened to be that we're that sort of placement in the solar system that could actually enable life to thrive. So that's just one.
Well, we're in the perfect position for life as we know it to thrive, but there is life out in space.
You haven't proven
and there are life forms on other planets, and in other solar systems with different sized suns and everything like that, the distances would be different to have a similar effect. and on other planets there may even be other forms of life that we haven't as yet identified. It's not like we've actually been on the surface of Mercury or Pluto to see what sort of life that can possibly have existed in those places.
That sounds like an argument that it could possibly happen that's similar to the multiverse. It's like this out there could be out there. We can't see it. We haven't found it. We can't prove it. It's not scientific yet. You're using that as some sort of an argument.
Well, no, all I'm saying is that our understanding of how life functions on Earth can only function in the parameters of our distance relative to our sun.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't then ultimately exclude the possibility of life which is different than the life that we know it existing on other planets.
No, that by itself wouldn't totally exclude it, but I'm just saying that is one of the fine-tuning arguments, I suppose, or parameters that...
But the thing is, you've got to remember our distance to our sun changes because we have an elliptical orbit.
Right.
So it's not like we have to be in that precise a measure, and our distance to the sun changes, as I say, quite a bit around the year.
Well, but
So,
I will say, though, that the fine-tuning argument isn't about one singular parameter. It's about multiple parameters converging.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
it really is a pretty narrow range of outcomes we're talking about, I think.
but that's the thing, the reason why it's not that narrow a range. We have lots and lots of variance in life, and that's because multiple different traits have evolved over time to meet a variety of different environments and environmental pressures.
No, but I think the argument is that slight variation in any or a few parameters that we're talking about would result in insufficient combinatorial space to support the kind of life that we're talking about. Like maybe if you shift one parameter, everything's helium or whatever. So you're not going to get that. You're not going to get just one element in a universe to self-replicate or to... it's not going to produce like an information system where translation occurs and that kind of thing. I think it's a little bit more of a complex argument than that.
Well, this is way over my head.
Probably mine too.
Tommy,
Yeah.
I just put something in the side chat. I just said 3 days.
Okay.
I haven't had anything to drink in 3 days.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Awesome.
that's thankful to the flu. So I'm just like, all right, well, I'm done with that. So
So you didn't have any, what's the word?
withdrawals or anything like that?
Withdrawal. There you go. Withdrawals.
No. Sorry to sidebar this, but I talked to Tommy privately and I hang out about it. No, because I kind of scaled it down because everything started tasting awful. And then it
Did you
just...
try having a hot toddy when you were suffering with the flu?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's like warm whiskey.
No, we don't. I don't think we have whiskey here.
Hey, we're trying to get him back off that. Don't steer him back that direction.
No, I'm not going to go back that direction. No. So that's why I wanted to share that with you. So I'm feeling
awesome.
fantastic. So no issues at all.
That's
really?
great.
Yeah.
Golly.
Yeah. So
Too bad you didn't get sick a long time ago.
I know. Gosh, no kidding. But you know,
Dang.
it worked. But yeah, I was on a weekday. I was at probably about 8 to 10 on a weekday and a work day. And then on a weekend, it was 12 to 16 a day.
The fact that you didn't have withdrawals is just amazing.
That's crazy.
And you're lucky.
Yeah, I think, well, what my wife says is, like, you probably just sweated it out, is what happened with the flu. So yeah, you have no shakes
Or your
anymore.
withdrawal symptoms just got added to your list of symptoms with the flu.
Yeah, because I had the flu for 7 days, or 6 days, so I'm finally
Yeah.
well enough to go back to work, so...
Wow. So
Yeah.
how do you feel? Do you feel lighter, or what do you feel physically?
Feel great. The only thing is, and I was joking with Elsa, that's my wife's name, by the way. I think Tommy, you know that.
Hmm.
Um, is I would lay in bed and like I just can't fall asleep. She was like, "Well, yeah, because you pass out."
Oh,
So I'm learning actually to naturally fall back asleep.
oh, I have a
Rather,
theory. I have a
yeah.
theory about why you don't have withdrawals.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean,
Get it.
it fits in perfectly with this. Think about the flu, and not to get gross, but when you have the flu, generally, your body gets rid of garbage. You're throwing up, you're having stuff come out the other end, and it's constant for however long you have the flu. So it's in a way it's kind of like it's kind of like your body purging all kinds of garbage that exists, that's built up, the pus in your cells and all that stuff gets ultimately extracted and gotten rid of. So that maybe at least might have helped, because your liver, all that stuff really does. And you probably didn't eat much. If you're sick and have fever, you probably fast. Fasting
Right.
is another thing that it sort of commences the cellular response to sort of cleanse itself, kind of a self-cleansing that cells do. So yeah, I mean that's just my own little.
Yeah, I was never throwing up, but I had some back end issues.
Yeah.
But not to be gross again, but I understand what you're saying. I mean, that's a good possibility. So, but no, I'm
Mm.
feeling fantastic, and my co-hosts don't know, and I'm not going to really say anything. I'm kind of let them figure it out because I don't want to disappoint at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you always have seemed to me to be very clear-headed. To be honest,
Right.
even when I guess you were drinking. I mean, you never had that sort of dazed, out of it sort of look or sound about you.
No, I think because my tolerance was so high.
Hmm.
I think I slurred a little bit, but what's that? Say again?
Tolerance for theist being a little high.
That too.
Need to work on that. He's too nice to me right now.
Oh, it stays this way.
Oh yeah,
Get
it
annoying.
doesn't change. Unless you're pillbox, then that can get a little different.
Yeah,
Well,
Scott's so nice. I've told him before. It's frustrating that he's not a Christian because it's like, no, dude, come. You look and sound like a Christian. Just in your conversation, it's like, no, you really need to be on our side.
let me
I
ask
am on
So
your side.
I know.
so maybe I could ask a question then, Scott.
Sure.
Now you are a atheist.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so why are you an atheist?
I'm an atheist because it doesn't make any sense. When you really, really think about things from the most logical talking snake donkey, you know, man from a rib, or I'm sorry, man from dirt, woman from a rib, and then here's this garden. Don't eat from that tree, but then they do eat from that tree, and then Cain and Abel get born, and then one kicks the crap out of the other one and kills them, and then I'm sure there's other children that are barely mentioned in the Bible where
So
there's no
fairy
pro.
tales.
I don't like to say that word because it's insulting.
Okay, yeah. I'm
I
meaning
believe it's more
myself anyway.
accurate.
Yeah, I mean that's just because I mean you've heard that before, so I try to at least when people ask me questions like that, give them the answers that maybe they've heard it, but maybe they haven't heard it this way. So I
Sure.
mean, yeah, you have Noah and the flood, then you got Jesus was born, but we can't account for the first 30 years of his life, and then he dies, and then he's raised from the dead as in only some X amount of people see him, and then no one sees him ever again. And that's the end of the story. Then everyone's going to hell. And in addition to that, sorry,
It's pretty
Well,
funny.
okay, so
Uh,
my thought as you're explaining this. Sorry, are you guys hearing an echo from me?
that's me again. Sorry.
Okay. My thought as you're explaining that is this is really religion specific. A lot of these objections here, but I think that theism can be independent of any particular religious point of view. So, strictly thinking about your idea of God or a God that may exist, why do you reject that?
Because it why? There's no
Well,
point.
for example, Antony Flew came to believe in a deistic version of God. So,
Sure.
so why would you reject simply the idea that a God may exist, whether he's deistic or whether he's personal or whether some religion got it right or all religions got it wrong? Simply the idea of a God. Why do you reject that?
So you're saying because Anthony Flew ended up accepting God prior to death, then I should?
No,
That's
I'm
like
not saying that. Uh,
that's like me saying that's like you asking me because I have Gene Simmons tattooed on my arm, and if he becomes a theist, I should.
no, I
I
don't
don't think
think you
that's
should
the
be a
point he was
theist
making.
because
I think
Antony
he
Flew
was using
became a
that
deist.
as an example of his question. And it's not a bad question. It's sort of like a question of he can understand. You give your reasons for rejecting the Christian God, but why do you reject all gods and the possibility of a God? Because theism doesn't just mean Christianity, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good way to phrase my question.
I think he was asking you, right? Or
He
were
was
you asking me?
asking you. He was
Wait.
asking you. I was reiterating
Oh,
what
okay.
Brandon was asking you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like, why do you not believe in Zeus, or why do you not believe in Allah, or things like that? And these are again arguments that have been repeated. But another reason is because if you get a group of, let's say, to 10 to 15 theists together, and they're just theists now, and they're all sitting there talking about theistic beliefs, they're going to disagree and argue, and it's going to be a you're right, I'm wrong, or you're right, you're wrong argument, and it's going to be circular. No one's going to get anywhere.
Yeah, but I think that a lot of theists do converge on a lot of similar arguments, though. Like you've got Muslims making similar arguments as Christians when it comes to evolution or maybe fine tuning or things like that.
But Muslims draw a lot of their influence from Judeo-Christian beliefs. That's probably why. And you'll see similarities between certain ideas and sort of like European Christianity and sort of European pagan religions.
I'd like to address something Scott said, and just to kind of, you were talking about talking donkeys and some of these other, stories in the Bible, which on the face of it does sound hard to believe to some people. But the other thing is, though, you got to keep in mind it's all relative because even on your side or the other side, the idea that the universe came into existence by itself or from virtually nothing, the size of a pinhead or something, and then exploded is just as amazing as a talking donkey, or the fact that I could understand an animal if it spoke. Animals speak. It would just be a matter of me understanding what they're trying to say. But also, like an exploding star, we're supposedly stardust, and somehow that kind of took shape and it
Actually, the quote
happened.
is star stuff,
Star
not
stuff.
not star dust. Star
Oh,
stuff.
star stuff. Oh, yeah. Well, okay. Well, either way. Anyway, the point is that we on both sides we have our quote unquote fairy tales. So it's really a matter of which fairy tale you want to believe in, and it's
The
kind
one
of
with
it's kind of
maybe.
it's a crude way to put it, but the thing is the further back you go in history, the more you read about the ancient people and historical people, but the further back, the more thousands of years you go back, the weirder it seems existence was. Just look at their writings. I mean, and what they did and their practices were. I mean, it was just so bizarre, and so it kind of lends itself to the idea that, well, maybe the beginning of life was bizarre. Maybe it was quite different than what we experience. But
Well, I don't really think. I mean, I don't really think that a god is that much more bizarre than the fact that we exist. I mean, do you ever see the old Fantasia movie where Mickey Mouse is zapping these broomsticks because he stole the magician's wand or whatever, and they all start walking around and stuff. That's animated matter. That's what we are, you know. We are
Mm.
the brooms in this Disney fairy tale, but we're real, and that is
Mhm.
absolutely extraordinary to me that we are animated matter. So I don't think it's really as fantastic as it's often portrayed to believe that there might be another form of the same thing we already have experience with.
I
Mm.
do have a question for Tommy. I have a
Yeah.
follow-up question.
Mhm.
Do you think that people on the atheistic side believe in the Big Bang and or evolution?
Oh, well, yeah. I think the Big Bang, at first anyway, back in the 50s when it was proposed and or proven scientifically or accepted by the scientific community in general, was really in a widespread way sort of shunned, and it was an embarrassment or to a lot of, not an embarrassment, but they really wanted the universe to be eternal. That's, I think, their real dream is the eternal universe. Now evolution, I think, is, an atheist, I think, would have to agree or believe in naturalistic processes, that those brought us here. I mean, that's the only alternative I could think of to a preordained, purposeful existence. So,
What do I believe?
yeah, I know we've been through this. I haven't quite hashed out all your beliefs, but I think you are. I think you are, on the topic of evolution. You seem to be, A, you don't care, which I've been there, but
Yeah.
B, you don't seem to really know. So,
Right.
right,
And I think that's the honest answer. Because I think that's where we get into this fight where because I'm an atheist, I have to believe this,
right.
and I have to hold to that. And
But
if you're, go on.
I, I'm just wondering though. It's often said that theists are the ones making the claim, but I think when you're talking with atheists who they form opinions about theism and about atheism, aren't they at least kind of stuck with the alternative claim that naturalistic processes can do certain things? Aren't they making a claim as well about nature, whereas the theist is making a claim about God?
Well, nature exists.
Yeah, and if theists would stick with talking about theistic things and not dabble in nature and try to make claims against nature, then there probably wouldn't be a problem.
Well,
But
sure.
it's when people try to take theistic views and have to make nature comport to it is where you start getting into conflicts. Like, the Big Bang. If everybody would accept that, like immediately the churches started hijacking that whole thing and be like, oh, see, we told you so. That was in the Bible, the Big Bang. So it's
Right. Well, I mean, if it was in the Bible, I don't think they hijacked it. It just happened to coincide with the Bible, which is
well,
why it was
they
controversial. But I,
this was predicted by the Bible, basically, and science is just catching up, and that's a
right.
ridiculous claim.
Well, the point I was making was that one theistic argument that I like is that conscious mind, we know is causally adequate to produce certain effects. Okay, and nature, mindless nature, is not known so far to be causally adequate to produce the same effects. Okay, so the claim on the theist side with this kind of argument is that mind is causally adequate. And then the positive claim that the atheist is stuck with, in order to argue against this, is that nature is causally sufficient to produce those effects. So I think that the atheist is, in certain cases, stuck with making a positive argument. And you don't get to just, shift or pretend like there's no burden of proof on the
Well,
atheist.
but you have to admit, at least on posing a naturalistic explanation does offer you some avenue for exploration, where posing a god pretty much dead ends any kind of curiosity or discovery of how these things really are. Because
Well, I don't
when
really I don't know about that.
well, where do you think conscious came from?
Consciousness. I think
Hmm.
consciousness. Well, we don't really understand consciousness fully.
But
There are
where do
different
you think
theories.
it came from?
I haven't really settled on an opinion about that. I mean, I used to be a computationalist, but now I'm not so sure because there were competing theories about it.
Well, where do
But
you think life came from?
life, well, define life.
I mean, living things. Where do you think that came from?
Well, in a biological sense, I tend to think that they were designed.
There you go. End of exploration.
No, it's not the end of exploration. I mean, you're the question is not. The question is what is true. Okay,
Hmm.
so if you've discovered the correct answer, is that the end of exploration? I mean, is Darwinism the end of exploration because we've ruled out spontaneous generation? I don't think so, but I think it's an equivalent statement to claim that.
Well, you could definitely investigate how the creator did certain things, but it's to me it's just a non-answer, and it doesn't to say that the people or the atheists are stuck with naturalistic explanations as if that's a bad thing, where the theist
No, I don't.
claims truth or that they know or um, you know what I mean. It's
Yeah, I think. Well, I think you can't apply some of these ideas you may have gotten from other conversations with theists to me, because I don't claim to have absolute knowledge or of truth or whatever. I'm not making truth claims at all. I'm simply saying that one argument that I like is that mind is causally adequate for certain effects. We know this. And that mindless natural processes are not yet known to also be causally adequate to produce certain effects.
Like what
I don't know
effects?
what you're talking about.
Right. So maybe I can say this a simpler way. Mind can do certain things that nature is not known to do. So when we observe these
Example?
things, the explanatory resource available to us is mind when we observe those things.
I need an example because I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so archaeology. Okay, we discover hieroglyphics. We don't say that wind and erosion produced that. We know that mind does this, and so we infer mind.
Huh?
Yeah, when we observe hieroglyphics or certain kinds of structures, we infer that conscious activity was involved in producing those effects because we have not observed that nature is sufficiently coordinated to produce hieroglyphics.
To recognize them, like as coming from another mind, is that kind of what you're getting at?
I think what he's trying to say is that the chances of, say, us finding a wall and it having markings on it like hieroglyphics that's purely made by straw blowing past it in the wind and eroding it into a certain pattern is extremely unlikely. That certain complex patterns could only happen because something with an intelligence put them in, eroded that wall down to those specific patterns. Would that be
Well,
a fair?
sort of, except I'm not arguing from probability. I'm more arguing from the qualities of those things. Um, the qualities of the like the hieroglyphics is the example that I'm using here. the straight lines and things like that. Just
Are
the
you
structure of
arguing
it.
to be able to recognize those things or to produce those things? Nature can't do that?
Well,
Or
what I'm saying is that it's a reasonable inference to suggest that mind was involved in producing these effects.
oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
What
Okay,
is
so
what
now
is
if you
that?
wanted to argue the opposite, you are stuck arguing that there is an alternative cause that can produce those effects. So you would be stuck arguing that wind and erosion did it or something like that.
It would be you saying you're saying that we would have to deny that an intelligent being put those markings on the wall. I
No,
just
not that you would have to deny it, but if you wanted to deny that, you would be stuck making a positive claim about an alternative cause.
Okay, yes, but Brandon, if I can take your example and use it against you for a second.
Go for it.
Um, in a situation where there has been no evidence that intelligent life has been present, for instance, let's say there's an island somewhere and there's hieroglyphics on the wall, and there's no other evidence of human beings on this island, no other structures, no toolistry, no bones or remains, that we can then say, well, let's look at the possibility of certain weather patterns producing this through erosion, rather than just assume an intelligence without any other evidence to support that.
Sorry, I had to step away for a second. Can you summarize that in one sentence?
Yeah. In one sentence, that's a bit of a reductive. Basically, you assume an intelligence put the markings there. We're saying let's have some evidence that intelligence was there before we just assume that those intelligence were that those markings were the result of an intelligence.
Well, no, I think the evidence is that we know that intelligent minds or conscious minds can produce those same effects. That's the evidence. Is our prior knowledge about the effects of mind.
Yeah, no, you see, this is the whole point of, as a theist, you believe that an intelligence God created the universe, yeah?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Now, we as atheists say that we believe that the universe came about by some other method that doesn't involve an intelligence.
Well, okay, I guess we can get down to specific things here. We could talk about DNA, the information systems there. Okay, it has features that are not known to be produced without the intervention of mind.
Like what?
Well, it's an information system. You have a series of signal components that are translated into disparate physical states. So there's a code, there's translation, and that code is completely arbitrary, yet it's functional. And this is an important feature of code. We don't know that nature produces these kinds of systems without the aid of conscious mind. So in principle, anytime that you make an inference, you are correlating the effects that you observe to the causes known to produce those effects. Right? So this in principle is not bad reasoning. And so I think if you're going to offer a counter argument, you have to make a positive claim about an alternative cause that is also sufficient to produce that effect.
Well, we do. We can. When it comes to things like DNA, what you have is chemicals which are governed by a system of laws. These laws are the way in which these certain chemicals react with one another. And because of these laws that are in place, this way that the universe works, it produces these outcomes.
Well, that's very vague. I mean, you have not described a process. You have not described a
I
natural
have described.
mechanism.
No,
No,
I have.
you've assumed that natural law can do it, but you haven't explained how. This is an ongoing problem in biochemistry. I mean,
Yeah, there's still a lot we're
the most
learning.
the most recent research I've seen is that somebody finally tried to tackle the sequencing problem, which most origin of life research does not focus on that. So it was refreshing to see that. Yet it did not solve the problem because it relies on a prior code. The researchers frankly admitted this. So that's pretty recent research, I think, from this past year, or within the last year, I think. So no, the problem has not been solved. And so there is not a naturalistic alternative, to my knowledge. You can't just say nature exists and it does stuff and then claim to have explained the effect.
Hello, gaming.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the reason why you don't need an intelligence to get these is that we have laws. These laws that we're still understanding, we're still learning new things about every single day, come
Yeah.
about from the.
Oh, just got muted for a second somehow.
Yeah, gaming gangster muted me. He probably muted you too.
Oh, that's weird.
Why?
I don't know how that even is possible.
He says sorry.
Okay.
He does have a question though, just so you know.
Okay. Yeah, so when you're talking about laws, just because they exist doesn't mean they can explain anything. And, sure, yeah, we're learning, and we should continue learning about those laws. That's a completely valid research program. I welcome that. But, promissory notes does not count as an explanatory resource.
But no, this is the whole point. The way these laws interact explains how and why certain things function the way that they do.
Right. So, but what I'm saying is that they do not yet explain certain things.
Yeah, that's because our understanding is still very limited. There is still
Right.
technology that we have yet to discover to be able to detect certain forms of particles. There is still
Okay, so
behaviors of certain particles we have yet to fully understand and explain.
So let me clarify, if I can. The theistic position is that we recognize certain effects that mind is known to produce, and so the theist, from this, can reasonably infer the activity of a conscious mind of some sort. Whereas you, on the other hand, would be more satisfied to wait around for a plausible naturalistic explanation.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Because
then
there's
in
no
that,
point saying
so then
it's
strictly
magic.
speaking, though, you are conceding that the theistic point of view is currently the best explanation.
No, I'm not saying it's the best explanation. I'm saying it's an explanation. I'm not saying it even is a good one. You say it's that it explains this stuff. I'm saying the things like DNA and the mechanisms that it resulted from are not yet fully understood and explained by human science. And
Yeah, so they're not
there's no
explained.
point just to assume out of hand that some magical consciousness did
Magical.
it. Well, I mean, he has properties that sit outside of nature itself, so therefore he would be supernatural.
I don't really. That the semantics of that
Unless you're trying to say God is a natural creature.
I would be fine saying that, yeah.
So your God is in no way. Your God is essentially just an extraterrestrial.
Well, I don't think there's any real distinction. I don't think there's a real distinctions.
Let me
But
just
I
put it
mean,
this way: do you believe that your God is sort of ancient aliensy, by which he terraformed our planet and put humans on it, or do you believe that he snapped his fingers and said, let there be light?
yeah,
Uh,
but what's the distinction there?
what's the distinction there?
Yeah, what's the
One
distinction?
one is creation. The other
Emancipate.
one is um, to change already existent matter into a different state.
Well, see, I think that things existed, with God since the
Okay,
beginning. I've
so
always
do you
existed.
believe that matter and energy existed as God began to exist, or do you believe God always existed and thus then brought into existence matter and energy from his own word?
I think that God always existed. I'm not sure. I'm completely open to the possibility that something other than God also always existed.
So did God create matter and energy?
That's a good question. I would have to think about that more. Maybe.
Because either God created matter and energy, which
Well, if we're
puts him
talking about like,
outside the natural
well, if we're
sense, or God repurposed matter and energy and is therefore part of the natural sense. So he is either a more advanced being, like an alien among ants, or he is simply um, a supreme being that sits outside of
these
time
words,
and space and therefore is a magical wizard.
I don't know what any of these words mean. Supreme, magical. None of this actually means anything. These are not real distinctions. How is God any different from a alien?
Well, because an alien would still be made up of that same matter and energy. If God created matter and energy, he couldn't have existed before he created
Yeah, but
himself.
what if there are extra dimensional beings? Would you not call them aliens?
Yeah, but they'd be extraterrestrial. There'd be other dimensional beings.
Yes. So isn't
They
that what God
wouldn't.
is? Isn't that exactly what you're describing as God?
Not really,
He's
because God
extra
would still sit
dimensional.
outside of that known universe. Either God is outside of our universe and created it, or God is inside our universe and part of it. So God is either part of the natural world or he is supernatural. He can't be both. I'll be right back. My baby's just woken up.
All right. So if something uh, exists outside of the universe, it's supernatural. What about the multiverse? Does that mean it's a theory about the supernatural? So does that mean science can study the supernatural then? I don't think these are real distinctions. Uh, but we're far removed from the point I was making, which was that the theists are making a claim, sure, but when you're gonna argue against it, the atheist is stuck making a positive claim. So there is, I think, an equal burden of proof on the atheist as is on the theist. Did who was it that had something to
Oh,
ask
he
me?
left actually.
Oh, okay.
Hello, Bulldog.
Did Bulldog have something to ask?
No, just saying hi to him. Hey, Bulldog.
Okay. So I guess then the other thing is that,
I'll ask a question.
yeah, okay.
Why do you care?
Well, I just think it's really interesting for one
Oh, okay. I'm no. I mean,
thing.
I didn't mean for that to come off across offensive or anything like that. I mean, it
Not
just
at all.
just like I always ask that to theists who really want to tell their, and I get that they want to tell their story and all that stuff, and that's fine. But the why they care is always interesting to me. Is it going to change your life if I don't believe?
I'm back again, by the way.
Hello. Yeah, it, I mean, as from a Christian point of view, Christian is a lot more invested in what other people believe because they're called to evangelize the world. But strictly as a theist, it's just interesting to me, I
Fair
love
enough.
the science of it, the philosophy of how you can structure a reasonable inference. How do you differentiate between competing inferences? That's all just really fascinating to me.
Oh, cool. And I don't want to lose him again. So gaming gangsta is back. So he's got a question.
Shoot, gaming gangster.
Okay, I'm here now.
Hello, Bulldog.
Hello,
Yeah,
Bullock. Gaming, if you can unmute, that'd be cool.
there's one fascinating thing I've noticed about theists is, or creationists, that they never try to prove their own creation. All they do is try to disprove evolution. Isn't that amazing?
Well, I don't think that's what I just did at all.
No, but that's what they do. I've never
Said
heard
do
any
do.
any creationists say, "Look, I've got some really good evidence here in my hands. Let's debate it." Right? All
Yeah,
they do is get on
Bulldog.
Hangouts,
I think you've got.
say,
I think you've got the thing is that with some Christians, they're fine with the idea of a more deistic universe whereby God created life and life evolved into things, which is what Brandon seems to be, judging by what he said. Going
yeah,
along
yeah,
some of the sort of slightly creationistic arguments about how
yeah, but
DNA is information, so it takes a mind, but it doesn't then disclude the idea
no,
of evolution. And I don't think Brandon
yeah,
is
I know.
necessarily against evolution, but with some, just purely the idea that God didn't magic everything into existence and, have Adam and Eve and, all of that, that then has to exclude evolution from its
Yeah, but
basis,
there's
because it
no
has to say
mechanism
that
for
all
this.
life was
This
created at the same time.
yeah, yeah, but see, they tell this story with no mechanism, right? No mechanism in place. It's just like, okay, poof, bingo, there it is.
Well, you
No
don't need a
mechanism,
mechanism in order to.
but you
No, you
need,
don't need a mechanism in order to
I'm
structure
sorry,
a valid inference. We
no,
don't
like
have a
you
mechanism
say,
for the pyramids.
yeah, but we know
What do you
how the
mean we don't
pyramid.
have a mechanism for the
We don't know the
pyramid?
mechanism for that.
Yes, we do, we do. You
Yet
just
we
don't know it.
infer
That's
that
all.
human beings made them. No, come on,
No, no, no.
that's been a huge
Well,
mystery how
no,
the pyramids are made.
No,
we
it's
know
not a
It's not a
human beings
mystery.
made them.
it's
We've
not a
got
It
mystery.
we've got
has been a mystery.
sophistry,
Look,
No, well,
even if it's
you,
been solved,
and
it was at one time a
we've got
mystery.
written works which describe them being built.
we've got. I got videos of 10-year-old children
So what?
lifting up one-ton blocks.
There are plenty of monuments.
One-ton blocks without machinery.
There are
With wood
plenty of
and
structures
rope.
around the world for which we do not know the mechanism.
No, we do. No, you
Name
just
one.
don't know the. You just don't know it. We do know it. We do know how the pyramids were built,
That
and it's
is
been
amazing.
demonstrated.
It has never been a mystery how the pyramids were built. That is
No,
absolutely fascinating.
No, it's a mystery
certain
too.
factors of the building of the pyramids was a mystery, but over time we've discovered writings and carvings
Right, and
which
even
show they're not a
so
mystery.
even before you discovered the mechanism, you inferred that people created them. That
But
minds
no.
were responsible for
Well,
designing
we
them and
found
building them.
also human remains inside the pyramids, which would show that humans had been around,
Well,
and
sure, that's an effect of
carvings of
mind.
things, and obviously word of mouth and things like that that had travelled down from, the people whose ancestors had built them,
Yeah.
and from other people who had visited that area
Right.
from.
My simple point is that you don't need a mechanism to infer that intelligent beings created it. But I want to ask. I want to go to gaming. Gaming Gangsta has a question. Does he have a microphone though? That's the
Yeah, he's got a mic. He's just getting situated. He did put in the side chat.
okay. So
And,
how do I feel about Christians? Is his question. I'm looking at the right question, right?
yes, that's the one.
Okay, so how do I feel about Christians? That's really broad. What I would say is that I'm very jaded, or I have been very jaded. I was raised in church, and I became very jaded toward church, and actually, um, Christians really, really annoyed me for a long time. But over the past decade, I guess, I've kind of come around to see some value um, in some of the religious things, going to church and stuff like that. I'm still a Christian. Um, for a while, I was a Christian that didn't like Christians, or that didn't like church. But I kind of have a lot more grace for people now. What I wish is that more Christians could articulate a proper theistic argument. I think the criticism that they just try to break down evolutionary theory is a pretty valid one. I do see that a lot from Christians. Instead of making positive arguments for design. And I actually think that's biblical. I believe it was the Apostle Paul who said that you can recognize the activity of God in creation, in nature. And I think that's where the strongest arguments to me come from for theism. I just wish that Christians were able to articulate that better.
Me too.
See, you've just validated what I said before. That's what creationists do, right? They never have any explanation for their creation, right? All they're trying to do is argue against evolution, and if that would even prop up their own belief. And they fail miserably.
Sometimes they do fail miserably, but I
And
don't
guess
accept
what?
the universal characterization there. I don't accept that
No,
because I think there are good arguments.
yeah,
It's
no,
just that a lot of Christians don't make them.
Well,
But
no, there's no real good arguments when you're going against obviously demonstrable, provable facts that show that the Earth is older than, say, 6,000 years, that
Yeah, well,
other pre-human
Christians believe that.
humanoids existed, that we shared DNA with things, and we can follow the pattern of language and things like that further back than what young Earthers
Yeah,
will
but that's
attest
only
to.
one kind of Christianity. I mean, not all Christians believe that. I actually doubt that the vast majority of Christians even have an opinion.
And that was kind of my point earlier with getting like 10 Christians in the room or 10 theists in the room. Y'all going to disagree,
Yeah.
and everybody's right.
Well, yeah,
You
I
know.
mean, there
So
are some core things, but
But let me ask you a question. Sorry, so I don't lose it. What makes you more right than other theists?
well, everybody thinks that they're right. So that doesn't, it doesn't make me any more or less special that I think I'm right.
Well,
I
you
think
created a
I'm-
room to ask you a question, so
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's only part of my response right there. Is just to say that it doesn't make me more or less special that I think that I'm right. Everybody thinks that they're right, but I think I have good reasons that I'm pretty sure that I'm right. I'm not making truth claims.
so do
But
they.
What?
So do they. They have good reasons as well, and they can
Well,
say the same
sometimes
thing.
sometimes they do, and I would disagree. Sometimes, other times that they have good reasons.
So again, you just said that you're basically admitting that you are right and they're wrong, right?
Well, not. What's your scope here? You have to be more specific. You have to make a specific comparison. I agree on some things and disagree on other things.
The age of the Earth.
Good question.
Yeah, I would disagree probably with the young Earth creationist point of view that the
Why
Earth
do
is
you
just
disagree?
6,000
Is
years.
it because you believe in carbon dating? Is that the reason? Because a lot of creationists, they try to actually debunk carbon dating, and yet they're all talk and no action.
Oh no, you can debunk carbon dating Radiometric is a bit harder. The problem there's a twofold problem with carbon dating. It can generally work up to a certain area, and then after that, its accuracy goes down. The other problem is that pretty much the way carbon dating works is that you have carbon-14 atoms, and over time they turn into, I think it's nitrogen 14. And so by counting the number of carbon atoms and the number of nitrogen 14 atoms, and then obviously the difference between that number and the carbon atoms gives you a rough approximation of the age.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, this kind of stuff, I like that kind of stuff, the science and whatever. And that's kind of how I like to form inferences. Now, I would distinguish between myself and a lot of other Christians, and that a lot of other Christians are quite happy just to accept the authority of the Bible without having to examine it any further than that. And that's not my approach at all. I was in a hangout the other day where this guy, I mean, he was just a 15-year-old kid. Every time somebody disagreed with him or brought up some kind of point about science, he said, I'll see you on Judgment Day. It's just this authority that they rely on in order to draw up their inferences. I do not form inferences from authority. Certainly not religious or supernatural authority. I draw inferences based on what I know or what I've observed about the world. So I think that kind of answers, I think, Scott, right?
Yeah.
Was your question. I think that kind of answers your question a little bit about how I distinguish between myself versus other Christians.
Sure.
But, I'm not special. There are, not all Christians are the way that I just described.
So Brandon, how long... Okay. What would you go with, Brandon? Would you go with a 6,000-year-old Earth, or would you go for a 14.5 billion-year-old Earth? Which one would you go for then?
I mean, I have to stipulate that. I honestly need to research more, but I'm inclined to accept
How
a conventional.
literal do you think the Bible is?
I'm inclined to accept a more conventional view of the age of the Earth.
So you're not a Bible literalist, then?
No, I think the Bible is a combination of literal texts and metaphor and allegory.
Ooh, how do you determine the difference?
Well, there are a lot of different ways. I mean, there's literary styles and stuff like that. I mean, for example, the story of Job is probably allegory because you have these long dialogues between these celestial beings. So the literary style suggests that it's allegory. Whereas there are other stories where it suggests, the literary style suggests that it's a historical account.
Yeah, but
it's not all or nothing.
At one stage, couldn't you say that, well, Adam and Eve is true. Wait, we found Lucy. Adam and Eve is just an allegory. Isn't everything literal until it's disproven? Then it's just an analogy. Isn't that kind of the wiggle room you have?
No, I don't think
the great
so.
Theist wiggle room. So then if you have something that's supposed to be literally true and that can be falsified, would that then falsify the Bible to a point where you would say, well, if this is the inherent word of God, it is obviously incorrect?
You're asking, it sounds like, about my point of view on the fallibility of the Bible. Or the infallibility of the Bible.
Well, no, if you've got stuff in there that's literal and stuff which is analogy, and you say you can't ever be wiggle rooming between going, that was literally true until it's falsified, and then I just turn around and say, oh no, it's analogy, then if you say there's something in the Bible that's literally true that can then be falsified, wouldn't that pretty much falsify the Bible?
I don't view the Bible in that way.
Quite fallible.
Yeah, I don't view the Bible in that way. I have a little bit of a different view of the Bible. I view the Bible as Like, okay, hypothetically, if God existed and there were some kind of crazy things going on, you'd expect to find some record of it. And maybe that record was a little imperfect here and there, but you should be able to discern some kind of pattern through historical records or through cultures or things like that. So I don't view the Bible as immune to valid criticism. What I'm more interested in is some of the patterns and, can they be corroborated by extra biblical texts? That's more interesting to me than biblical infallibility.
Your chance now, gaming. Check your mic.
You kind of sound like a deist a little bit, like that just favors Christianity a little bit and kind of enjoys the stories that are in the Bible, or kind
It's
of.
funny. I think depending on how you define the words, I could be an atheist that simply believes that there is some kind of conscious mind is a fundamental part of reality.
Well, you're not an atheist yet, but we're going to get you there. Don't worry. It's going to be
We'll
fine.
convert you.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
saying I'm already there. It's
It's
just
gonna
that I
be a lot
believe that consciousness is a fundamental part of
Yeah,
reality.
it's going to be a lot of screaming and shouting and swearing
Well,
and all that
atheists do
stuff.
believe
But
that consciousness is a
yeah,
fundamental part of reality because we are beings that
No, I think it's emergent. I think atheists believe it's emergent. I think there's a difference there. Atheists seem to believe that consciousness emerged after, quote unquote, the beginning, whereas a theist might be more like consciousness is a fundamental part of ontological reality. From the beginning, it always existed. The fundamental structure of reality possesses consciousness in some way. I think that might be the distinction I would make. Although, then again, if I said that substrate on which consciousness exists in fundamental reality was a natural thing, am I suddenly an atheist? I don't know. I can just
Is it
call everything
falsified?
completely natural. I can just call it all
well, I think
natural,
we
and I'm
need
an
to
atheist.
first of all quantify what actually is classifiable as a god. In order to then say what is theistic and what is non-theistic. Because in order to be a theist, you have to have a belief in a god. Well, we need to ratify what clearly defines a god. Because I can believe that there are possibly more advanced life forms than humans in the universe.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean I'm a theist.
Yeah, that's a fair question. And the way that I define it is, I think, very simple, and I'm open to suggestions as well. But I simply say consciousness that has always existed.
And with that being said, I gotta go to bed. So it was nice talking to everybody.
All right,
See you
good night,
later,
Scott.
Scott.
All right, have a
Good
good
night,
night,
Scott.
everybody. See ya.
Good night. So, the way I define it is simply consciousness that has always existed. I think that's the simplest definition you can really get.
Sounds like
Consciousness
you're.
which has always existed.
Hmm. Or another way of saying it, consciousness that is a fundamental property of ontological reality.
Mucky face. You've got a mucky face.
Don't know what that is.
Oh, I'm feeding my daughter at the moment.
Okay.
And she gets milk on her face, and so I rub it off with a Muslim square and I go, mucky face, don't I? You want some more?
Itzelk has a question for you. The little what is that? Minecraft.
The Minecraft robot. All right. Itzok. Itzok, do you have a
It's like a
microphone?
cyber Enderman.
Do you have a microphone, Itzok? Okay, so I think we were just discussing the question that he's got in chat. Okay, his mic isn't working. So in the chat he asked, to a theist, what is a god? Okay, so I think we just discussed that. I don't know how you guys feel about that definition, if it's coherent or whatever.
I don't think
let
a
me-
consciousness is enough, because you're a consciousness, right, Brandon?
Yeah, but I had a beginning. I didn't always exist.
I just think it's it's too vague for to define a god as just a consciousness which has always existed, because does it exist inside the realm of nature, or does it exist outside the realm of nature? Does your consciousness exist out of all sorts of time and space, or does it exist as part of the matter energy?
I would say it could exist either way. As long as it always existed, then I would say you could think of that as a theistic quality. But, God, quote unquote, I think would be a combination of qualities. So consciousness, the combination of consciousness and of being uncaused or always existing, that combination of qualities, I think, I would be satisfied calling that God.
Good girl, good girl.
So, how much do you care about your beliefs being true or not? Do you care if they're true?
Yeah, I care a little bit that they're true. I think that I am a lot more open to being wrong today than I was 10, 15 years ago. I went through my whole big crisis in faith way back in high school, where
What happened?
well, I just began to talk to ex-Christians, and I had always avoided those conversations because I was deathly afraid of doubting. And eventually I finally confronted some of those things and radically changed my point of view about religion and about theism and stuff.
Hey, I've got to shoot off. I'll catch you guys later.
All right, good night.
See you later.
And so from that point forward, through additional experiences at church, I became very jaded, and I myself became very critical of Christians and even Christianity, and even theism for a long time. But I didn't overcompensate, though. Like, I didn't go to the extreme opposite. I never closed myself off to alternative arguments. So 10 years later, here I am, and I think that there are some good arguments for atheism, and I think there's good arguments for theism. It's just I think the arguments for theism are better. Well, some of them are better.
You've mentioned the consciousness one. Do you have another one?
Conscious.
Because I don't really. I guess it might just be me, but I don't. It sounds like kind of a God of the gaps type of thing that we can't explain consciousness. Therefore, this is
Right.
something that has to be supernatural. I mean,
Right. I was in a hangout recently, and I was the only theist in there. I think I might have the same situation tonight. But I one by one asked every theist if they thought that inferring a mind from certain effects, if that was a God of the gaps argument. And every one of them said, yes, that's a God of the gaps argument. So then I went on to explain that God of the gaps is not the structure of the argument. The argument is that we're familiar with the effects of the conscious mind. Therefore, when we observe those effects, conscious mind is an explanatory resource that is available to us. Now, the other question is there an alternative explanatory resource? In other words, can nature produce the same thing? I think on certain things the answer is no. But agree or disagree with that, the structure of the argument is not God of the gaps, because it is not immediately inferring God from the absence of information. It is inferring God from knowledge, not the lack of knowledge, but the knowledge of the effects of conscious mind.
Right, but
So
I think
it is not a God of the gaps argument. It is not the structure of the argument, whether you agree or disagree.
right, but it would be like saying, this might be a bad example, but like we were talking about earlier, when you look at the pyramids, you can't figure out. I mean, nobody knows how they were built, but you know that there was that there was a conscious thinking mind when it came to building them. We know now with pretty reasonable certainty how they were built. That's I think that's where the God of the gaps kind of comes in, is you're hanging your hat on something that may just have natural explanations to it.
Well, but anything may have an alternative explanation. Anything. That's true of any inference. There always may be an alternative explanation. That doesn't mean that the currently best inference is a God of the gaps argument, just because
I don't
we
know
don't
if
have
I
an
agree with
alternative one.
I don't think I agree with that. That anything may have an alternative explanation. There can
Well, but
always
do you
be a
agree that?
conspiracy put on something, but I
But
mean,
don't you agree that all inferences are provisional, or at least should be provisional?
maybe. Yeah, I'll go with it. Let's go ahead.
Right. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So all inferences, they are provisional. I don't remember what I was gonna say now.
Well,
Sorry.
let's try. I mean, I think Scott mentioned it earlier. When you get 10 Christians in a room, there's all these different. Everybody's got these different versions. You got young Earth, you've got old Earth, flat Earth now for some silly reason. So from the outside perspective, when looking at it, you're like, okay, if I were going to choose one of these gods and ask one of these people to bring me to Christ, you would be pulled in 10 different directions, and that on its just that by itself is reason not to grab anybody's hand and go that direction. I mean, to me, it is. It's like nobody. You all are all
You have
worshiping the
to,
same God, but everybody's running in a different direction. That
but
doesn't that strike you as a little
well, in
weird?
a way, it doesn't strike me as weird that humans would come to a lot of different conclusions. I definitely think there's a human element to a lot of religion. Sure, I don't deny that whatsoever. But I think there are some really basic claims, though, that you can examine. I think it's reasonable to examine the difference between a basic theistic claim and a atheistic claim, if we can say that. You know, I'm looking at this from a very high level right now. I'm not I'm not looking at all of the tiny minutia in every little religion. I'm starting with a pretty basic claim that something that we might describe as God exists, or at least that we have evidence of that.
It feels like asking you questions is partially trying to pigeonhole you, and that's not what I ever like to do. It's like, how old do you think the Earth is? Say it.
That's
Well, your
okay.
Bible says, but your theism is I'm trying to figure out where the contact points are with other theists that I even know, and it's very, I can't see any points of contact with I mean, you believe in
I
the resurrection, right? Maybe.
Yeah. I describe myself as non-traditional. So
Well, but you believe in the death, burial, and resurrection, that set of
yeah,
beliefs.
yeah. I mean, all of my beliefs are provisional. Okay, I'm not a Christian or a theist that says I know with absolute certainty about anything. So some of my conclusions are drawn from different things. Some of them are drawn from rigorous arguments. Other conclusions serve as a framework, of which some of those other arguments are built. So it provides an interpretive framework for other beliefs. Um, so I'm non-traditional. I don't make truth claims. Um, I don't know what else you want to know.
Did, are you okay with the gay marriage and stuff like that, and people being
Well, to
able to get a
me,
divorce, things like that?
well, to me, that's more. Uh, that kind of overlaps with politics there, and I think that politically, the government has no business defining people's relationships. That's an impediment to freedom, in my opinion. So, and I don't think government should be in the marriage business in the first place. So, if the government is going to be in the marriage business, at least apply things equally. So, um, that's where I fall on that issue. Now, theologically, um, I think there are different kinds of morals. Theologically, there's the material morality, where morality is measured by the effects it has on other people, and then there's a different kind of morality that's derived from design, which you see this in like biblical texts or things like that, where it seems like something that strays from the ostensible design, the ostensible intention of the design of nature or whatever, is thought of as immoral. Um, Frankly, I'd have to study gay marriage more in depth from that point of view. When I was in college, there was a group of gay Christians who were demonstrating at various Christian universities around the U.S. And when they came to our campus, we welcomed them and we had some really great conversation. It was really interesting. So I think that issue is not as clear theologically as it's sometimes made out to be. So I'm perfectly comfortable saying I need to read more about that. I'm an atheist that is comfortable saying I don't know. I'm a theist. Wait, did I say atheist? By some
Freudian slip.
definitions, you could say I'm an atheist. I think everything's natural, therefore there's no God.
Just come on over.
Matthew says Freudian slip. It's a semantics thing.
You're close. You're close. Take your time. Take your time.
Brandon,
Mm-hmm.
can I ask something?
Yeah, I hear somebody. Is that AB?
Yeah. What do you think about afterlife?
Yeah, that's a good one too. I'm honestly, I honestly go back and forth on that. I sometimes think that a material explanation of the mind is sufficient, and it would be unparsimonious to suppose that there's anything beyond the natural substrate of the mind, which is the brain. Um, Other times I'm not so sure. I start to overthink things maybe a little bit. Like, for example, I was reading about the amplituhedron, which is a geometric structure that exponentially simplifies the calculations for particle interactions. But the thing about that is it works when you eliminate the assumptions of time and space. And so I wonder then if does this mean that time is illusory? And if time is illusory, does that mean that I always exist? I mean, I don't know. So, and then the other thing too is I don't know. I've heard all kinds of wild ideas, like the information in our brains becomes entangled somehow on some kind of substrate. And these are coming from physicists saying this. I don't know how good the theories are. I have to read. That's again something I have to read more about.
Yeah, thanks.
Do you think atheists are delusional?
Atheists are delusional. I don't think they're delusional, but I sometimes think they can be a little bit credulous about the power of nature to produce certain things.
Should really reform that question. Is atheism delusional?
No, I don't think so.
Well, you're not a real Christian then.
Well, I wouldn't
No,
say
I think I
that.
am.
Have you ever seen William Lane Craig, Brandon? Hey, what's up, brother? By the way, it's nice to see another brother in Jesus Christ instead of a bunch of atheists hanging around here, you know.
I don't know, Neo. He may not be. We are slowly.
Yeah, they're
chipping away.
constantly trying to deconvert you, so do whatever you got to do.
Oh, I don't think they'll deconvert me because I think I have better arguments.
You've got the consciousness one, but I don't. It's 'cause I don't understand.
Arguments ain't gonna save you.
Well, sure. From a Christian theological point of view, that's absolutely true. Absolutely. But I don't think you can really be saved
I don't think you can really prove
without believing.
God in an argument. So.
Oh, I don't think you can prove anything. The point of arguing is to determine what the best inferences are.
And I can see how that would get you to deism, but maybe you could say how you
So maybe
made the
I'm going
leap
to convert you.
Well, how do you get from?
Yeah, maybe
How do
they
you get
you to deism, not me, buddy.
Well, no, I mean, if the inference that you make from your observations and your consciousness argument, I could see that getting you to deism. But how do you go from that to the Christian God?
I mean, that's a really good question. And I've wrestled with that a lot. I still wrestle with that today. But I think there's some pretty interesting information out there historically that corroborates at least some claims in the Bible. At least some. I try to be careful about that, though. Because some people say that Noah's Ark has been found, and that's not the kind of thing I'm talking about. Because I don't think Noah's Ark would still be around, even if it did survive the flood. I think it would have decayed by now. So, but I think there are other things like there's an interesting documentary about the Exodus narrative, and it's really absolutely fascinating the extra biblical information that corroborates some of these events, even some of the fantastic events like some of the plagues. There's a papyrus that talks about the Nile turning to blood, and some of it is very highly specific to the Exodus narrative. So I ask myself, to what extent does historical evidence prove fantastic historical narratives, such as the Exodus narrative? And I would say to myself, it really can't prove it. But if it actually happened, you would expect that there would be some kind of independent documentation of these major events. And I think we do see that. You'll have to see the documentary. It's called Patterns of Evidence.
I've seen that,
Yeah, in particular, that one papyrus is amazing. The detail in which it corroborates the Exodus narrative.
I wanted to answer how he said, how do you get from deism to Christianity or whatever. And how I did that was realizing that other people that make up gods in their own minds, like deists do, Hitler did that and a bunch of other people, and making up your own god in your own mind is delusional. You have created your own god. Now you're thinking about a created god instead of an uncreated god.
Well, I prefer to say the word credulous. So I think a lot of atheists are completely credulous that nature is sufficient to produce information systems. They're entirely credulous. And what we get is endless promissory notes that we'll figure it out someday. That's credulity to me. But if a theist was doing the same thing, was saying the same kind of thing, I think that atheists would probably call them delusional.
And
Who's delusional?
like the Bible says to me, there's nothing new under the sun. They're always going to have an answer for you, no matter what it is. So, I mean, you could say something, now it's neoplasticity, or whatever the hell it's called. Well, whatever.
Plasticity?
I can't even say the word.
That just sounds like, guilty as charged. I mean, having an answer isn't a bad thing. It should make you question your answers.
Well, I'm not even asking questions. It's you guys asking questions. I'm good at what I'm fine with what I believe.
Yeah, you don't care if it's true or not.
No, I know it's true to me. I don't care if you think it's true. I don't care if you think it's true because I can't convince you that it's true. You have to accept that by yourself.
Oh, so we got Bulldog here. You have a question, Bulldog?
No, I'm just responding to Neo's stupid answers.
He always likes to make fun of me and stuff.
Okay.
Because you know why I like making fun of you? Because you're easy to make fun of because you talk shit.
Damn. See, I knew it. It was only going to take a little to make him rage quit. Damn.
Yeah, I know. But he might come back. He might come back when he comes down.
Oh,
there he
yeah,
goes.
and here's the
yeah. I love that. Oh, that's
Boy,
I
was about to say now the outside chat is about to blow up, but I just didn't have enough time.
Well, hey guys, I got time for maybe one or two more questions if you guys have anything else you want to chat about. And I'm going to have to.
You have to go?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go in a few minutes. So if you guys want to ask anything else.
Well, you should have all the questions for us because you're sitting on the fence by the sounds of it, and we've just got to get you over to our side. So you should be asking us questions. We shouldn't be asking you questions because you're the one requiring the answers.
I don't know about that. I wouldn't say I'm on the fence. I've been thinking about this stuff for a long time, and I'm pretty satisfied with where I'm at.
You know, what we have to do with you is work out what part of the Bible you believe in and what part you don't believe in. Because the part what you don't believe in...
There are parts of the Bible... There are parts of the Bible I explicitly believe, and then there are parts that I provisionally accept, but I say that I can't prove it.
Oh, well, if you can't prove it, then you've got to lose it.
Well, but no, I think you can say it's part of a larger framework of belief that's corroborated by other things.
Okay, can I ask you a question then? Do you believe in the Exodus?
Yeah, I've been pretty well convinced about that narrative. Yeah.
Okay, so what is it the lack of evidence that is that the reason why you believe it?
The lack of evidence? No.
Yeah. Well, you're talking like you do realise that the Exodus, had like 1 million plus people walking across the desert, correct?
No, not necessarily. Mm-mm.
Well, okay then. How many people then?
I think that argument's been debunked. I don't remember the actual numbers, but
Well,
I'll have
everyone
to read
I've
more about
spoken
that.
to,
But I don't accept that number. I'm not just going to accept that number because I've heard that argument
well,
before.
what number do you want to accept?
Well, I have to read the specifics, but I've heard that argument and I've heard a response. So,
Well, put it this way: the lowest number that I've ever come across, right, is around about 600,000 to 700,000 people. That's the lowest. I've heard numbers going up as high as 2 million if you're counting all the women and children.
well, it's fine.
Right.
You can point out problems, but I think there's definitely still some good positive reasons.
Because we have to start at a number before we start with the story. So,
No, not really.
I can start with a
That's
number
only
if you
one
like.
element.
I can start with 500,000 people
No,
if
that's
you
only
want.
one element of the story. You can look at other elements.
Yeah, but we have to start with a number of how many people left.
How many
If
people
you're going
are-
to turn around and say like it was only 6 people, well, that's not much of a story, is it?
Well, there's a large population of Semitic people in Egypt. In the
Yeah,
thousands, at
I
least.
agree. That's why I was asking you. What number you wanted to start with, so we can sort of carry on the conversation. Because I don't want to be halfway through the conversation and then you turning around and flipping it on me and going, "Oh no, well, it was only a couple of dozen people. What are you talking about?"
No, I'm allowing that maybe there are some problematic elements of the story. I'm allowing for that.
Oh,
But
okay, but if they're
what I
problematic
am saying, no, I'm not at all saying it's a metaphor. I'm saying that there may be unresolved elements of the story, but meanwhile, there are also elements that have been corroborated. Some of the most fantastic elements have been
I'd love
independently
to. Listen, if you've got any pictures, right, or scientific stuff, which and if you're going to get it off a Christian website, I'm not really interested in that sort of nonsense, right? But if you wanted to show me some,
how about archaeology?
you know what?
How about
I've got
Egyptian papyrus? How about that?
a papyrus doesn't
Let
tell
me ask you a question. If a Christian website discusses or posts a picture of an Egyptian papyrus, you would reject it because it's on a Christian website.
Well, they have posted.
You're not interested in it.
Hang on a
because
second.
it's
Yes,
on a Christian website.
they actually have posted things on some of their websites, and I've silly me not reading a little tiny thing down the bottom that they photoshopped some of the things.
Photoshop? You think it's Photoshop?
Yes, they have done it. They have done it. It's been photoshopped.
No.
Yes, you're exactly correct. That's when you start to think to yourself, why would they go about doing that? Put it this way. I'll give you an example. I'm not going to tell you the website, but you'll be able to find it if you search it. If you can show me, right, like a first or second century map of anywhere on that map where it lists the town of Nazareth. Because like back in the first century there was map makers.
Okay.
Right? And there were Roman map makers and Greek map makers. Now, they probably made maps every, I don't know. I'm just, let's say for sake, every 5 years they sent someone out and say, listen, go and make some maps for me, right? So there's still a lot of surviving maps from that era, right?
Okay.
Now, all the maps that I've seen from that era, right, the originals, they don't have the city of Nazareth on any of those maps. Now, in the Bible, Nazareth is quite a large city. Now, why would a map maker, not a map maker, lots and lots of map makers from Roman and Greek times, all making maps on their own, why would all of them, right, all keep missing the city of Nazareth? What?
You're raising issues.
It's like me going to America.
You're raising
and
a lot of really specific issues here.
Well,
I can't
I am
possibly.
being very specific.
I can't
I am-
possibly have researched every one of these
I have.
very
I've seen-
specific
No,
arguments
I have,
here.
I've actually looked at the original maps because, believe it or not, they're actually in museums right as we speak, and they've
Alright,
got
well-
pictures. They've got pictures, so I can see a picture, and you can
Fine.
too. That's the
Look,
beauty.
here's a simple point I'll make. Just because
Okay. So you're making up excuses now.
I haven't even
That's
said
what
anything.
you shouldn't do.
All right,
You should.
I haven't even said
Making
anything
up
yet.
excuses.
Bulldog's getting a tad bit aggressive here.
I haven't even said anything yet. Just because you have things that you can explain doesn't mean you don't also have positive things. For
Well,
example, yeah.
I don't think what you're getting what I'm saying. Like, there wasn't just one map maker for 100 years. There was lots, and we still have lots of those maps.
Well,
that exist
as
today.
you described it, it sounds problematic, sure, but without researching it, I'm not going to just say that you've accurately described the situation.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Now that I've explained myself, right? Now it's up to you, right, to prove me wrong. Now I'll tell you where you can prove me wrong, right? If you go to a Christian websites, right, some of those maps are on Christian websites, and they've actually photoshopped Nazareth on top of it. And don't you think that's a little bit deceitful?
Well, if that's true,
Don't you think it's a little
but I'm not going to
deceitful?
just.
That's
You obviously have a lot of very highly specific complaints here.
Yeah.
I think
I know, but
what's been asked of me is, what do I believe or why do I believe? And I think that there are positive reasons to believe certain things, such as the Exodus narrative and some other things in the Bible, unresolved issues notwithstanding.
Okay, here's another thing for you to have a think about. Like, these are only thought things. Like, if you ever go to a football game or something, there's only like about 100,000 at a packed venue. And have a look at the rubbish left behind, right, at a football game. And then say to yourself, well, okay, they didn't have plastic cups and paper cups when they were crossing the desert, but they had a lot of pottery. And, 500,000 or 600,000 people not smashing one pot, not one horse or donkey or nothing died, no one starved.
Wait a second. You're saying that we don't have evidence
The
of
food problem.
we
the
don't
food
have evidence
problem.
of the Jews existing in that?
No, you've got to answer about the evidence. Let's talk. Don't.
We know a
sidetrack.
Semitic population lived in Egypt. That's historical. That's an archaeological fact.
Listen, Egyptians had this uncanny way of writing things on walls. I don't know if there's any wall in Egypt where they didn't write something, and they used to love documents.
Actually, the name
if
Israel. Yeah, the name Israel appears in hieroglyphics. Actually,
It does, yeah, and guess what? Where it doesn't say shit. There was 500,000 people living here either, and they all pissed off in one day.
yeah, and you've also got a papyrus describing the Nile turning to blood, and the man who pours water
Yeah.
on the ground turns the Nile to blood. That's highly specific. Plus, some other highly specific things about the slaves
I've got a bit of
taking the riches with them as they left. I mean, these are highly correlated to the biblical narrative.
my swimming pool turned green. Oh, I wonder what happened there. I don't know.
I mean, you're coming up with all these problems, but we can't. You're coming up with all these problems that I'm not gonna just Google all these right now.
I know, but what I'm saying is,
what you asked is about positive reasons. Okay, you didn't ask me to resolve every problem that you might think is out there. That's
listen.
the important thing is, are there positive reasons? But
all right, okay.
I want to get a question from AB because I think this is going to be my last one here for the night, if I could.
I'll mute myself.
Okay, and then we could pick it up another time, though. I want to get AB in here.
Hey, what do you think are theists' agendas? I mean, the main goals. when they're trying to uh, convince other people that about the idea of God? What are their main goals?
The theistic agenda.
What are they trying to achieve?
The agenda of theists?
Yes.
I don't think there is one agenda. I think different theists have different agendas. I think a lot
So
of
what effect are they trying to achieve?
well, a lot of them just want to be right, but I think that's true of people in general. They just want to be right. But then I think there are a lot of really genuine theists who believe that they've discovered the way of salvation and they want to share that with other people genuinely. Or maybe it's not even about salvation. They genuinely want to share the joy that they have in their faith with other people. I don't buy these conspiracy theories that a lot of atheists seem to put forward. You know, I grew up in church. I had problems with church. I had problems with Christians, but I never thought that the Christians that I was around, and I was around a lot of them, were disingenuous about sharing their faith. They all, the vast majority, seemed to truly believe in their faith and wanted to share the joy that they felt that it brought them. I don't think there's any kind of like grand conspiracy or ulterior motives or whatever.
Yes, I was just trying to understand what they want to achieve. Just simple. And what do you think are atheists trying to achieve? I mean, I think it's very different, or different ways of achieving the same thing.
The atheists who talk about atheism seem to think that religion is really dangerous, so they want to eradicate it from the world. I mean, I'm not, mind reading here. They pretty much say that. Most atheists who talk about their atheism.
We want to get everybody. We want to get them to at least where you're at.
Right.
I would be fine with that.
Oh, that's pretty generous.
You seem to be a very docile, harmless Christian.
Yeah. I am pretty harmless. Unless I'm cooking something.
It was good talking to you, man.
Yeah, you too. Hey, I'll set these up from time to time, so add me to your circles, guys.
Should I put you under atheist or fundy?
Put me under non-traditional.
Non-traditional. You got it, man. I'll make a category.
Yeah.
On the fence. On the fence.
Yeah, it was the fence, that's it. But we're going to pull him off the fence.
I'm going to put you on the fence circle as well. I think we made some progress here.
I'm not on the fence. I'll tell you what I'm going to be on in a minute, right? I'm going to be on a couple of bottles of beer in a minute.
All right.
Mm-hmm. By the way, Brent, just tell me, do you believe, the Shroud of Turin? Are you familiar with it?
A little bit. I don't know about all that.
All right, but I was going to ask you a follow-up. Do you believe it's that's really Jesus Christ, or is it a fake?
I honestly don't really know much about it, so I couldn't say.
All right, that's all I wanted to know. That's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, I know it's controversial. That's about it. I respect the controversy.
Yeah, but you've got to be open that, when someone says something to you, maybe they're right about that, because I think...
Oh, yeah, sure. It could be complete fabrication. Who knows?
Because a lot of theists that I speak to say, no, it's definitely 100% real. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah, I have no idea. Like I said, I'm a theist who's comfortable not knowing.
Well, don't you want to gain knowledge?
Yes, absolutely, but I think we are over my question quota right now. So, let's continue this maybe later this week or something.
Yeah. Next time you're doing a hangout, let me know.
Yeah, sure. Add me to the circles, and I'll post the link up there. All right, guys. Thanks for chatting. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it.
Okay. There you
All
go. I've added it.
I'll talk to you guys later. Okay.
Gotcha.
All right, bye.
Bye.